his reading habits, which I
Oh
forgot
yeah,
about, because I know
yeah.
the Crystal Zevon has the library she had for a while where she was sending, selling books on Facebook.
Yeah,
Do you know what his favorite book was?
he had a number of different ones. When he was in the 70s, his at least one of his favorite books was Four Quartets by T.S. Eliot. And the only reason I can rattle that off is because I know he gave it as a gift to Paul Nelson at the first attempt at sobriety. And also, I had to remove it from my book because the estate of T.S. Eliot they would have wanted a lot of money, but I had picked a section from each of the quartets for each section of the book, The Mirror of Warren's Life, because I read the book while I was writing this. And if you read the books that he loved, you see so much of him in it. You go, I know that that was one of his favorite books of poetry. And I don't know favorite books, but as far as favorite authors, he loved Joyce Carol Oates and he binged all of her stuff. He binged Hunter Thompson, Thomas Pynchon,
Oh yeah,
and
well,
yeah, huge Pynchon fan. And I know he loves Salman Rushdie. I'm trying to think of some of the favorite favorites of his. Those were big ones, but the big one in the 70s was Russ McDonald. Ken Millar, also known as Russ McDonald. He loved his crime novels, his mystery books.
What
okay.
about Neuromancer?
That was for a very brief time. He
Okay.
was obsessed with cyberpunk. Yeah, that
Yeah.
was that was. I think that. Well, okay. This is a theory.
Okay.
His OCD was very serious. That was a big part of the second half of his life. And if something or someone was deemed bad luck, he would drop it like a bad habit.
Right.
And I honestly think after Transfer City lost him his record contract, I think the genre might have been viewed as bad luck to him. But in the build
Yeah.
up to Transfer City, which I do love, I mean, there's
Yeah.
stuff on there to really appreciate, especially that it was an early demonstration of digital editing, and he was
Oh,
one of the first people to jump on board. Even if you're not crazy about the music, the idea that it was done in 1988 into 1989, and no other artist at that point, except for maybe Neil Young and the guys from Pink Floyd, were really toying with it at that point. It's pretty impressive that he got that sound on the budget that he had, because it's a very atmospheric
right.
album, even if you're not crazy about the sound of it. It's atmospheric at least. It sounds like Blade Runner. But yeah, in the build up to that, he did binge Gibson when he was at least writing it. Yeah, that is true.
For the record, we're fans of that album.
Oh yeah.
Well, I won't joke. I'm a fan of that album. I like that album a lot actually. So, Run Straight Down is one of his best tracks,
That's a
I
great
think.
song. Yeah, I
Yeah.
love that song.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Splendid
yeah,
Isolation.
Isolation.
Yep.
But what's sad is that Splendid Isolation is the only one from the album that he continued to perform after the album didn't do very well. That's the only one that he kept in his repertoire. But it's fascinating because if you go back, and if anybody is unfamiliar with the album, don't skip around. Listen to it in one sitting because its songs bleed into each other like a classical suite.
It's like reading a Gibson novel is what kind of is like. It's got a very yeah.
Very
It's
much so.
it's a great album. It really is. I personally think, but that's
Glad to hear you
not
say
everybody
that.
loves it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I have to
Mhm.
defend that one sometimes.
Oh.
I don't think honestly. I mean, Joe, you talked about it on the pod. I don't think there's a single album he has that I really have a problem with, which is unusual for most. I think classic rock artists,
Right.
right? I mean,
Yeah.
that's not
Like when
usually
we,
there's a
we
bad
when
pick.
we when we did our Bob Dylan deep dive, we had some fun at Bob's expense listening to his late 80s output, which is
It's
really
tough, and
irredeemable.
some of it can be tough.
Looking at Zevon's catalog, there wasn't like a dead period where nothing landed for us. Every record had something for us, some more than others, but yeah, there's nothing to be embarrassed about in that catalog.
I think part of it is that Warren really was a perfectionist, and he was harder on himself than anyone was on him. And I was told that by multiple people. But it's also that think of how many times he was dropped by the record companies. It happened at least 3 times. So there would be
Yeah.
big gaps in between albums after the 70s where there was pressure to put out more stuff. That went away. And then he had the free time, and I shouldn't say free time because he was always touring and he always wanted to get signed again. But he would really kick his own ass in order to have the strongest possible material to present for a new contract. And if you look, his debuts are amazing. His
Yeah.
debut for Electra Asylum it's like a greatest hits album
Right.
because it took him like 6 years to write the material on it. It took him 3 or 4 years to write the material on Sentimental Hygiene, and it was so strong that it got him a contract. Then, if we skip later, uh, Life Will Kill You. He hadn't had an album in 5 years. He hadn't been signed to anyone for 5 years. Every song is fantastic because he really was crafting it for years and years and years until it was ready to meet the public. He wasn't like a rock star. He really kind of sort of put his albums together like a novelist finishing a book. And that's rare.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well put.